Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. On this episode, we have Johnny from Georgia, and he had a very close-up Bigfoot encounter when he was just a child. I can't imagine what it's like having a Class A Bigfoot encounter when you're just a little kid, and going through life knowing that no one else will understand. Johnny is a very confident guy, and he doesn't care what other people think or believe. He knows what he encountered, and that is the only thing that matters to him. I believe these creatures like to move when the weather gets nasty, and this encounter took place whenever it was raining outside. I had a strange encounter years ago when it was raining and I was walking through the woods very quietly doing owl calls, and three bipedal creatures ran up and they were bobbing their heads up and down. I couldn't see them very well, but they took off running, and the best way I can describe the run is similar to a cheetah. I think it was Bigfoot because nothing else in the woods is that big, and when they took off running, you could hear rocks being flipped around whenever they hit the creek bottom, and that's what they did. They headed towards the creek. And again, I didn't see their faces. I could just see their bodies, and whenever they took off, they were huge. So I know it wasn't a black bear or even hogs, because in this part of Missouri, there just aren't any hogs around. Johnny had a very close-up encounter, and this thing came right up to the window. If you enjoy watching Sasquatch Theory, please like and subscribe, and if you have had a Bigfoot or cryptid encounter that you would like to share with me here on the channel, please contact me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Alright guys, with all that being said, let's dive into Johnny's Bigfoot encounter from the state of Georgia. All right, Johnny, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for asking. Johnny, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
I'm in southeast Georgia, in a little just north of a little town called Swainsboro. And just a little bit about Swainsboro is it is known as being the only place in the United States that has two federal coast-to-coast highways cross. Highway 1 and Highway 80 cross each other, and that gave us the nickname of the Crossroads of the South. And I am 58 years old now, be 59 in a couple of months. And I was literally 5 years old when my encounter happened.
Okay. If you would, tell me about that encounter. What were you doing that day? And try to describe everything with as much detail as possible, please.
Okay. As a child, I was very sickly. I had a massive ear infection for several years. And at 5 years old, I was often bedridden because I could not hold my balance to stand up and walk because of an inner ear infection. They had not invented the tubes that they put in a child's ears now to prevent those infections or to help get rid of those infections, and that had not been invented at the time. And I was actually laying in the bed in the bedroom by myself, which was quite regular. I was always by myself like that. It was late in the day, the sun starting to go down. My bedroom was on the back of the house, so the back of the house was darker because the sun set in the west and our house faced the west. So I was in the darker part, and shadow and everything. And as it was getting dark, I was restless. I mean, I had slept most of the day and I couldn't sleep anymore, and I wanted to get up and couldn't. And as it got dark, this was down in the fall of the year, and it was not necessarily cold, but it was not 100 degrees outside, and the sun was going down, and we had the window up in the bedroom facing the back, and it was up most of the way. And for me anyway, for being a 5-year-old, and our windows went all the way to the ceiling and started about maybe 2 feet, a foot and a half, 2 feet above the floor. So they were large windows. And we lived out in the middle of nowhere. We had a huge field behind the house, and our closest neighbor was about 4 or 5 miles away. We didn't live close to anybody. We couldn't see street lights or house lights or car lights or anything going down the road. But I was wide awake. I felt like I needed to get up, and I felt funny because I felt like somebody was watching me. And I sat up on the edge of the bed, and I was sitting there. The light was on, and all of a sudden, I was facing the edge of the bed, was facing the window, and I saw the biggest hand I have ever seen in my life at the top of that window, and it was on the glass, the whole hand. And I just looked, and it just kind of surprised me. I was not scared, and I was surprised that I was not scared. 5 years old, I should have been terrified. But the curiosity in me, I'm a Taurus, so I want to find out about things. And I literally stood up and walked over to the window. And I'm looking at this, and this hand, and I noticed it was hairy. There was hair on the sides, and it was a dark hand. The window was kind of fogged a little bit at the top, and I was just standing there, and all of a sudden I saw something just squat down, kind of to my level, and he put his hand back on the window right where I was at. The window was up, but I could see his hand, and I just instinctively put my hand up against his, and his hand was probably 10 times the size of mine, if not more. And he moved his face closer to the window so I could see him. And I say him because at that distance, with the light shining out of the window, I could literally see the muscles in his shoulders and his chest and his neck and his forehead, his nose, everything. I could see all of that. And I instinctively knew this was like a man. It looked like a man. And he had solid black eyes. And when he breathed, it kind of fogged up. He was close enough to the glass that he fogged up the glass. And I just stood there, and the look in his eyes is almost like he could tell that I was very sick. And it was almost like a look of compassion or sympathy or both. And he just stood there looking at me. And this thing could have killed me with a swat, like a bug. I never felt like he was a threat at all, looking back at it. And I just never have thought that. But he was literally on his knees. The back of the house was closer to the ground than the front of the house, but he was on his knees, but his head was well above me. And he squatted down more so I could, and he was right there. And he just looked at me, and the look in his eyes I will never forget, because he had sort of a frown, like he wanted to help me, or he felt sympathy for me or something. It's just, I could feel it. It was like an energy that I felt when he got closer to me. And he just looked at me in the eyes. He never turned his eyes from me. And I'm looking at him. And he just, this whole thing may have lasted 5 minutes. And I'm standing there. I never once got nervous, never once got scared. And this 5 minutes of that seemed like a lot longer than that, but that's about how long it was around 5 minutes. And nobody had come to check on me for a long time, so probably several hours. It was normal. I mean, I was in bed, what's going to happen? So my mother opened the door and to check on me, and saw me standing at the window. And she started to say something like she was going to get on to me for being out of bed. And she saw this thing. And she said, "What in the world is that?" And I just turned around. I said, and I had never heard the word Bigfoot that I can recall back then. I had never heard anything about anything like that. I had never seen anything on TV. We only had 3 channels on TV, no cable out in the country like that, no satellite. That wasn't in existence then. And I just turned around and looked at her and I said, "That's my friend, Mr. Bigfoot." I don't know where I got that phrase from, but I just said that. And she ran out of my room and went to get my daddy. I turned back around to him and he turned. He made no sound at all. But when he moved his hand, it swiped across the fog on the window on the outside where he was. And he turned to my left, which was to his right, and he just stood up and walked off. He was no more than 2 feet, 3 feet from the house at that point, and he just walked off. It was already dark by that time, and it was raining. And I did remember that the rain beat it up on his hair. His hair was not wet like if we got in the shower. The rain beat it up on his hair. And he walked off. And so my mother, she went and got my daddy, and he came in there and he wanted to know what I told her. She couldn't even tell him. She was so upset. And I told him, and I described it, and he went outside with a gun, a pistol, and he couldn't find any foot tracks where the rain was falling off the house. I guess, messed up the tracks or whatever, but he didn't see any tracks close to the house. But further, that the way he went was towards the north, and there was thick, tall grass right there, sort of like not brush, but more or less grass and weeds. And he saw where somebody or something had walked through there, where it had pushed down the grass, a distinct line, where something walked through there. And he came back in the house and got a flashlight and walked out there, and he just followed it as far as the path went, wherever he went. And he never saw anything, never heard anything. And he came back in and he said, "I have no earthly idea what it was." And I said, I know what it was. I saw it. And, I was standing right here, and he looked up. I said, see the handprint right there? And he said, "You sure this was not a person?" I said, "No, it wasn't a person. He was hairy. His hands was hairy. His arms and shoulders were hairy. His chest was not, but his chest was dark. He was hairy. It was not a man, but because his nose was extremely wide and sort of flat, but his nostrils pointed straight down just like mine did." That's why I don't know if that was why I was not scared of him or what. I didn't care. I just knew that this thing, whatever it was at that time, I have no earthly idea of what to call it until I said that to my mother. I just knew that I felt like that he knew what was wrong with me, and that he felt something of sympathy or empathy or whatever you want to call it. He felt that for me because he knew, he could sense what was wrong with me. The look in his eyes told me that. And for a while after that, they wouldn't let me go outside by myself. And later that year, excuse me, about 2 years later, toward the end of that year, that would have been, this happened in 1971. About 2 years later, toward the end of that year, we moved, and we moved about 4 miles closer to Swainsboro. Still out in the country at that time. It's built up since then. And as a matter of fact, the end of December, I've lived in this house for 51 years. And while I've been here, ever since I've been here, if I go outside at night, even today, I have many times, many times, I feel like something is watching me, and I automatically just stand there and look and see if I can see anything or hear anything. And I can be outside, even though there's houses around us now. Um, I can be outside and a wild deer will walk up to me and sniff me. I don't know why. They're not scared of me. I'm not scared of them. Birds will fly up to me. I can be at my truck talking to somebody on the cell phone, leaned up on the bed rail of my truck, and a mockingbird will land on the opposite bed rail and sing up a storm. And people will comment about how loud that is. I'm like, he's only 3 feet from me. That's why. And this happens every year usually during the spring. Cardinals, mockingbirds, different things, squirrels, rabbits will come up to me. And the first time that a deer came up to me, it kind of shocked me. I didn't jump or anything, but I felt like something was close to me, and it was at night, and I was checking on my dogs and my chickens and other animals and stuff, and I was just outside. That's just what I do. I do it all the time, and I felt like something was around me, and I turned around, and this deer, it was a female deer standing right there, not a foot from me, and she just sniffed my shirt. And I mean, not scared of me at all. And I've had that happen so many times that people are amazed that I don't know if I attract animals like that, but they come up to me like that. They always have my whole life. And I mean, it's just, I relate that back to why this thing came to me that night. I've always wondered and thought to myself that he had been watching me from a little bit of a distance for probably a while. I mean, and he he finally, he took a chance at it, and he came to the window that particular night. I have felt like I have sensed his presence at the new house several times. I could hear something in the woods behind the house, and it was not a rabbit or something that light. This was something very heavy that you could hear breaking sticks as it was walking. And I couldn't see anybody. I mean, it's thick brush and things like that. But I've just wondered so many times if he followed us. I mean, I've just wondered that because there's multiple acres of wooded land behind our house now, and it's just one of those things that I didn't talk about for a long time. I've probably only told 5 of my friends about that, and they laughed. I'm like, you can laugh all you want to. You were not there. I saw it. I was there. And I don't care what they think. What you believe is your belief. I was there. You were not. So, you believe what you believe. And I just know what I saw without a shadow of a doubt. It was crystal clear to me because he was right there, not a foot from me. He didn't make a sound other than I could hear his breathing because he breathed and it fogged up the mirror. But the fact that that happened, I believe that when I sense him being around here at the new house, I just wonder if he's still trying to like watch out for me or check on me or things like that. I have not seen him. I've always been the type of person growing up that I lived in the woods. They'd have to come find me in the woods. I've always done that. Never scared. That's my place, And the people that I have told, they're again few and far between. I've told a couple of family members, and my mother refuses to speak about it. I've had family members ask them, and She will not talk about it at all. And I didn't for a long time. So I like I say, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care what anybody else believes. Until you experience this, you will always think the way you think most of the time. I saw it. I was there. If that glass had not been there, I would have actually touched him. And I would not have been scared to do so. And I believe that. And I don't believe he was there to hurt me in the slightest, because he could have if he wanted to. And that's my story.
All right, Johnny, thank you very much for sharing that with me. And that's an incredible encounter that you had. And yeah, it seems like these creatures are attracted to you. I'm not really sure why, but it could be a reason why animals just come right up to you. And the same thing happens with me. I'll be at someone's house and their dogs are just glued to me. Like they want to lay on my lap and cuddle up with me, and it happens all the time. And whenever I had my Bigfoot encounters, like I had multiple encounters back to back, and I don't know why. I feel like they're attracted to me for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Go ahead.
I can be at a friend's house or a total stranger's house with a friend, and they may have a very aggressive type of dog, and the dog is barking, and I can walk up to the dog and they will tell me that dog will eat you alive. You need to stay away from him. I said, no, I don't think he will. And I walk up to the dog and I start petting it. And they're like, that's amazing. He does not do that. He eats people. I mean, he will bite people. He will tear your arm off. He's trained to do that. And I'm like, I felt like him barking at me was him calling me to him. So I just walked to him and I started petting him, scratching him behind the ears. And he's like, that dog never does that to anybody. And their spouse or whoever, their children, these dogs are vicious. They won't even let us, the kids told me, they don't even let us around the dog unless they're out here with us. And it never gave it a second thought. I just felt like this dog is barking at me to come to it. So I did. And it is one of the weirdest feelings that that. You don't have to really experience it, but it's like it instinctively that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's the same way here. People's dogs normally don't like anyone, and they're always surprised that the dog likes me. They're like, man, that dog always barks at people and he won't let anyone touch him. And I don't know why that is. I always wonder about that. So whenever you encountered this creature, you didn't feel any fear? You felt calm?
None. I was to me, it was just like a person I knew walked up to the window, and I'm like, what are you doing out there? I literally was not scared in the slightest. I had no fear in me at all. And at 5 years old, I should have been terrified. I should have screamed at the top of my lungs, but I just knew. I don't know how. I just knew. I don't know if it was an energy coming from him to me or both ways. I don't know. I just remember I got up and when I saw the hand the first time, curiosity got me, and I want to see what this is. I didn't care. I walked up to the window, and then he squatted down, and that whole thing took place. And it never crossed my mind until afterwards that this thing could have hit me one time and killed me. Never crossed my mind during it at all. Not one time. I have a strong feeling that because I could see his eyes and the look in his eyes and the look in like his forehead, furrowed brow and everything, that he was sympathetic to my situation, and he knew my situation, I felt like. And I didn't think that he would hurt me. It never dawned on me that he could.
Yeah. So you think the creature came up to the window because it had compassion for you or empathy or sympathy?
Yes. And I believe that it probably had been watching me before that, and probably over time came closer and closer. And it just happened that time that he walked up to the window and put his hand up on the upper window, and I saw it. And I got up, and I was sitting on the edge of the bed. I stood up and walked over there. And I do remember this, as sick, anybody who's ever had inner ear trouble, that you don't want to stand up any more than you have to during that. And I just remember during this, I didn't feel any of that. Not any of it. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel dizzy. I didn't feel lightheaded. I didn't feel anything out of, of any kind of inner ear trouble. And I will say this, I had that inner ear trouble until I was 15 years old. It happened when I was about 18 months old. I got hit in the ear with a snowball and by a cousin of mine, and it busted my eardrum. It burst that, and they did not, back then, antibiotics, that just was not a normal thing to do. And so I didn't take antibiotics. And when I turned 15 years old, I had to go to an ear specialist in Savannah, Georgia, and they had come out with a brand new antibiotic ear drop. And that's what cured my infection. And I have never had another ear infection since. Wound up having the ear surgically repaired. I was deaf in that right ear where that happened, and they restored my hearing with the surgery.
Yeah, it could be possible that the creature had been watching you for quite some time, and it's incredible that you went up to the window and put your hand up against the glass. How big was his hand from like the top of his middle finger down to the bottom of his palm? How big would you estimate it to be?
Probably 10 or 11 inches, at least. And you imagine my 5-year-old hand up against that. His hand was 10 times bigger than mine.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, it's a giant. Do you think it was a male or a female?
I believe it was a male because I could see the muscle structure. The light from the room was shining on him through the window, even though it was dark outside. He was right there at the window. And I could see the muscle structure of his shoulders, of his neck, of his chest. And his face just made me think this is a male, this is a man of some kind. And I just believe I would have known the difference if it was a female. She wouldn't have been as big, I don't believe. And this thing actually when he stood up, he had to bend over some because he was under the eave of the house, and he had to bend over because it was raining, and he walked off that way. His head was bent over close to a 90-degree, just his head and all. He was bent over pretty good not to hit his head on the house, on the eave of the house. And I have no earthly idea how tall that would have been, but he was taller than that. So it's like I can still see it and sense it, just like I have dreamed about it. I have dreamed about it because that just is something if I ever develop Alzheimer's, I don't think I'll ever forget that. I just don't think I would.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that, the people, to me, the people who are fortunate enough to actually experience that, the fact that I experienced it at that close of a distance is even more rare and more of a special thing to me, because there again, I think this creature wanted to show me his empathy and sympathy for me because he knew what was going on with me. And that's what makes me believe that he had been watching me for some time before this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I've noticed the same. Like, I can go to Six Flags or go to the fair or go camping, and it's hard for me to remember every detail. But when it comes to the cryptid encounters or paranormal experiences, like, I never forget it. I remember every single detail. And like you said, I think I could be like 80 years old and I'll still remember everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there again, I have never let any I've never really been criticized. I've been laughed at. I never let that bother me. I tell them out loud. I don't care. Look, you were not there. You did not see it. Mama saw it, but she ain't talking about it. She will not talk about it.
Yes,
And
this really affected your mother, huh?
it did. It did. It scared her. I mean, she was terrified. She ran out of the room, left me there at the window. And I mean, she was terrified, but it scared her so bad, she just left me at the window. And it was still there at that time, you know. And when she turned around and ran, he stood up, took his hand off the window and stood up. And he was not in a hurry. He just walked. He just walked to my left. Never made a sound other than, you know, I could hear his breathing when he squatted down, but other than that, he never made a sound. But when he moved his hand, it went sort of sideways, and you could see the finger marks on, you know, where he was breathing, where it fogged up the window. You could see where his fingers and his hand had been. And when he had his hand on the glass, his fingertips, they have fingerprints, just like we do, because I saw them. I saw that much detail. It was right there at my face. And hey, skeptics are going to be skeptics. That's because they have never experienced this. Any skeptic, scientist or otherwise, if they experience this one time, they will never be a skeptic again. They can't be. It's impossible. There is no other explanation for what I saw and experienced.
Yeah, and I believe you, Johnny. And to me, if I was the Sasquatch and I put my window up against the glass, I'm thinking to myself, it's almost like he's telling you everything's going to be okay, or, you know, There's more out there to life. Don't give up. I don't know. But it was definitely like a message of hope.
Exactly. I was, just as a side note to all of that, of the sickness and all that I encountered back then and everything, about not quite 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. And I have been very, very sick from that. This is a very rare type of cancer that only like 1 to 3 people per 100,000 are ever diagnosed with it. There is no treatment for the cancer. There is treatment for the symptoms. And I have had 4 surgeries since September. And through all of that and the healing from that, I have felt better now than I have in 25 years.
I'm really sorry to hear about that.
I healed from the surgeries and everything, even though there is no cancer, no treatment for the cancer itself. The treatment for the symptoms, that's what helps me function. And I just believe that the fact that I got better health wise, as far as the medication and the treatment that helps my symptoms doing its job better than they expected. I've always been the type of person that if I get really, really sick, people are amazed at how fast I heal. And I hate having a cold. I hate having flu or pneumonia, which I've had I think everybody's had some of that, but I heal from it in days, not weeks. And people are just amazed that they do blood work on me constantly, and they are amazed at my numbers. They're fixing it. As a matter of fact, my oncologist mentioned that I need to get with my primary care doctor to take me off blood pressure medicine. And I've been on blood pressure medicine since I was 22, and I'm 58.
Yeah. Just shows how resilient people can be. And some people can go downhill really quick, and some people
I know.
can overcome illnesses and just keep fighting through it. And I'm glad you have. I'm glad that you found the strength to keep going on, and you sound like a really good person. And it sounds like this creature
Well, thank you.
knew that there was something special about you. Like,
I believe so.
yeah. And whenever you saw the creature, was it moving like really slow or did it move quick? Can you kind of describe
When
what its
he
movements
put
were
his
like?
hand, when he first put his hand on the upper window, it was slow. When he knelt down, it was sort of slow. And then when he turned to walk, when he stood up, that he stood up, it was not very fast, but it was, he knew he had to get out of Dodge, I believe. And when he turned to walk, he was not in a hurry, but he had to be taking humongous strides because he was gone. But he didn't seem like he was in a hurry. But he did walk through the high grass because there was sign of that. But beyond that, there was nothing. And I just believe that something came from him to me in that energy. I've been the type of person that I don't care how bad circumstances get with me. I have never, ever in my life worried about anything. I cannot let myself worry. I just don't worry about anything. And because my philosophy became as an adult that if you worry about everything, you're going to make yourself sicker than what you're worrying about.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to learn how to do that because I worry a lot during situations. For some reason, I don't know why. I just start thinking about them and then I don't know, it's like a domino effect. I start worrying about everything. But I noticed that
Yeah,
whenever I had the Bigfoot encounters, like I had this calmness to me, and
absolutely.
I wasn't
Yes,
worried
sir.
about much for a long time. And I was going through sciatica pain, so I couldn't walk very well. But whenever I had these encounters, all of a sudden that pain went away for about, I would say, about 2 or 3 weeks. The pain was just completely gone. It later on
Yes.
returned, but for some reason, I don't know why, the pain just disappeared, and I don't know if that was attributed to like adrenaline and just thinking about the encounter over and over, which
Right.
really helped me with my stress and worrying. I think just thinking about these encounters kind of made all the other problems just disappear.
Yeah. Another little tidbit of my background is just for reference. I for the skeptics and anybody else, I have a radiology PACS degree, a health information management degree, and two healthcare IT degrees. I'm not stupid. I'm not the smartest person in the world by a stretch, but I know what I saw. I know what I'm talking about, and it does not bother me if somebody does not believe this. I don't care. I saw it. I was there. I experienced it.
I appreciate you for sharing that with me. What did this creature look like? Can you describe like how big the head was and its features? I know you mentioned it had solid black eyes, but did it have like a conical shaped head? Was the head like the size of a watermelon? Can you kind of describe that?
It was yes, more or less like it was as big as a watermelon, but it was elongated upward. I didn't. I just know his forehead was really big. From his eyebrows to the hairline was really high. I didn't notice the conical shape of the head as much. I just knew it kept going up. I could tell that from the hair. And his ears were huge. His eyes were fairly big. And his head was big enough that his eyes were spaced. If you took your hand and opened it wide and turned it sideways, your I call it the birdie finger, and to your thumb, his eyes were a little bit more than that apart. They were good distance apart. His head was that big. He was big. I mean, his shoulders were wider than that window was. His left to right was wider than that opening to that window. And if he moved a little bit, the light would shine on him in different places like that. But as as tall as he was, even when he squatted down, his head still went up high enough. I could see most of that, and I could tell it went up. It was just like it was like up but back, if that makes any sense. It wasn't straight up. It's like his head shifted backwards, up and back.
Yeah. And why did you feel compelled to go up to the window and place your hand on it?
I don't know if it was a feeling of safety. I didn't feel threatened. I was curious about it when I was sitting on the side of the bed anyway, on the edge of the bed, and I saw this hand. I'm like, oh, what is that? I want to see that. I don't know. I mean, normal 5-year-olds wouldn't have done that. I know, but I mean, you know, I it never dawned on me to hide from this. I mean, it just never crossed my mind. I want to see what this is. And now in my adult years, I'm the type of person that if I can't figure out how something works, I'll take it apart and say, I want to fix this. I want to, how does this work? I want to make it better. If it's broke or whatever, I figure out the inner workings of it. It never crossed my mind that this thing could be dangerous. I didn't sense that at all. And I have that sense about people or situations. I can see it's almost like I can see into somebody's soul, and I can tell what kind of person they are when I first meet them instantly. And I can just about tell them what kind of person they are.
Yeah, that's incredible. What do you think about me?
You seem, as far as being on the phone, you seem like a genuine person that you had an experience with this, and that you want people to understand that these experiences are real, that you are genuine in that belief, and you are genuine in what you're trying to do.
Yep, that's absolutely right, and you nailed it there. It could be possible that you don't worry a lot because whenever you encountered this creature, you faced it head on. Like, you didn't hide under the covers, you didn't scream,
Exactly.
you didn't allow it to affect you. So maybe later on in life, you were able to handle situations better because, hey, you seen this Bigfoot and you walked up to it and put your hand on the window. So anything else isn't really that big of a deal.
My oldest brother, who is 9 years older than me, he, about 4 months after my diagnosis, he made a comment to me that he said, "You just don't act like somebody with cancer." I said, how is somebody with cancer supposed to act? If is there a handbook or something? Because I'd probably throw it in the trash. I'm not going to go by that. I go by my way of doing things. And I don't worry about anything. He worries about everything. And I'm just not like that. My philosophy is, if you have a situation, it's either something you can do something about or something you absolutely cannot do anything about. If you cannot do anything about it, why are you wasting your time? If you can do something about it, what are you waiting on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because they try to fix situations that aren't fixable, and maybe control other people or control an outcome, and it just makes them more anxious or depressed. And it's better to know what you can face and what you can't. And sometimes, I even struggle with that. Sometimes, like, something's just not good for you, whether it's a person or a situation, and you just got to walk away.
Right. If you have a situation that you know for a fact you cannot change it, you cannot do anything about it, walk away from it and forget it. You are wasting your time to dwell on it. I don't have the time to dwell on it. I got stuff to do.
Yeah, that's a good attitude to have, and I need to take your philosophy and your approach to everything in life.
I wish beyond anything that I could go on an adventure and actually see another one before my time ends. I wish I could do that. That's not a given. That's not a given by any means, because people go all the time looking and they don't see anything. They may see tracks or signs, but they don't see the prize, so to speak. And that happens 99% of the time. But the times that it does happen, they will never forget it. And I just believe that if I ever see another one, not that it would ever be that same one, but if I ever see another one, I think it'll be just as enlightening as that one. I understand people that have had aggressive ones, and that I believe that is a situation where they feel threatened, and there's no way this thing felt threatened by me at 5 years old. He just didn't. He had no reason to be, and I didn't feel threatened by him, and I had every reason to be, and he could sense it. He could sense that I didn't fear him.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I'm not crazy enough to walk up to a growling, snarling dog that's rabid or something. I'm not, I know better than that. But a regular dog, it's like I can sense that this dog is calling me to him for something. I don't know what, but I feel it. And it's a sensation that I just know when that is happening. You can't describe it in any detail. You just know the feeling. Just like with birds or deer or rabbits or feral cats. I hate cats. I can't stand cats. I know cat people. My sister's a cat person. I don't like cats, but I have some cats that take to me. I will pet them and scratch them. I don't mistreat them, but I'm not a cat person. But then that cat knows that. I just don't mistreat the cat. I'm not going to. And I say I hate cats. I just dislike cats. I don't hate anything or anybody. I dislike some people. But that, there again, if I ever have the chance to see another one, I just believe that it would be a situation like you see some of the videos where the people were able to record them talking or making sounds. I don't believe it. I believe that it would see my light, so to speak, and know that I was not aggressive toward it, and it would know that, and it would act accordingly. I would not be a threat to it, and it would know it.
Yeah, I agree. I've walked up to 2 different Sasquatch, I believe, in my life after I had my encounter here with the jet black Sasquatch that stood up whenever I was walking back down the driveway. It just walked off into the woods, so I kind of pursued it, and whenever I got close to it, I couldn't see it, but I know where it walked to, and I could hear it huffing like a
Yeah.
So I just backed off. I was like, no way. This thing doesn't feel comfortable. I already seen it. Right. Now I heard it. So I'm just going to let it be, because I felt like it was extremely threatened. Another time was whenever one of my guests had me out at his place in the Mark Twain National Forest. I was getting ready to leave that night, and these things showed up. They started wood knocking. They were breaking limbs right in the wood line, right outside the yard, and I walked right up to it. I couldn't see it because it was nighttime, and he's right there in the woods, and I'm right there at the edge of the yard, but I stood in front of it for about an hour, and it was wood knocking right in front of me. It was incredible. I got audio of it, but I didn't get any video footage.
Yeah, and I don't know if they understand that either a distance or the lighting in a situation is to their advantage, and they know how to take advantage of it with video. But with cell phones like they are now, there's no excuse for a video to be blurry. None.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It could be possible these creatures followed you to the new property, or there was Sasquatch around there and they felt just as comfortable as the one that you encountered at the window. Yeah,
because they have a territory that they live in and move through, and we're not that. And the county where I live in the northern part of the county, and the county where I live, the biggest industry here is timber, pine tree forest, planted pines, and so they have plenty of place, even behind my house here. I mean, I mean, tens of thousands of acres. This is the second largest county in the state, land wise. And we're talking about $1 billion industry just in this one county. And so, I mean, we see, along the main roads and stuff, we see where they cut the trees and replant them. They always replant the trees within 6 months. And they cut them at around 25 years, 30 years. And, I can remember as a child, after this happened, one of my close cousins, they lived about 2 miles north of us on the same main highway, and, which is also out in the country. And when I was growing up, I tried to live with them because they lived more out in the country than we did. And behind his house, it was probably 2 miles back there. His daddy worked with the Forestry Service. Back then, the state has a Forestry Service, but this was a private Forestry Service, and he worked with them. And they had property. All the property behind their house was, I mean, it was as far as you could see. And about 2 miles behind their house was a pretty good sized pond. And we would sneak back there. We made our own little path through there, 10, 11 years old, to go fishing. And we went fishing all the time and never were scared. And they had to be watching us. They had to be. They just, I don't believe in situations unless they are threatened that they're going to be aggressive. I just don't, unless there's a child, one of their children, like a baby or something is close by. I don't think they're going to be aggressive. I just don't think they would. And I would have to be proven wrong on that, because I'll always believe that.
Yeah. I feel like there's good clans out there and bad clans, or good individuals and bad individuals, because I've heard some terrifying stories where people are just, doing their own thing, camping, and these things go like crazy, or like they've tried getting into people's houses. I've heard a story from Oklahoma where they just kept trying to get inside the house. They were not friendly at all. I've also heard some from like East Texas, from hog hunters, and a lot of them from Alaska. And it just seems like there's different tribes, and that's kind of how it was with the Native Americans. Like, there were some Native American tribes that were very peaceful, and there were others that would scalp you and kill you immediately.
Oh yeah, if you interfered with their territory, absolutely, yeah, they would. And this thing obviously lived around where we were then, and I've always had the sense, when it happens, I can feel it. I don't have to see it. I can feel it that one is close by, out of sight. But it's not hard to be out of sight here, with all these trees.
Yeah, I feel like Sasquatch that live around people or close to towns or little communities, it seems like they've become accustomed to people. And then there's other areas, like if you go to deep national forest where there's nothing else around and you encounter Sasquatch, they're like very territorial. Maybe they're not used to seeing people.
Right. Especially if they're not used to seeing people. They see it as a threat automatically, because they, hey, what is this thing doing here? I would be the same way, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why they're in the deep, because they do not like people.
That's right. And they probably, the one or two that they may have seen, they wanted to get as far away from them as they could.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'd be cool to camp with you one day. Maybe if I can get out to Georgia, we could possibly camp out there for a few days and maybe see if we can get a Bigfoot encounter to happen, because I think it'd be really interesting to have two people that have seen these things that animals approach and are comfortable with in an area. And maybe
the North Georgia mountains, that's very remote up in there. I love going camping up there. It's been a long time since I've been, And I have actually been talking about going this year, especially. Um, but up there, we've kind of known, and it may have changed a little bit since then. But the last few times I went, you had to wait until about the third week of June for it to be warm enough to go up there without snow. um, but that may have changed in the last few years because of how the weather changes a lot.
Yeah. I've been there before. It's a huge forest. I think it was the Chattahoochee or Oconee National Forest.
National Forest. Yes, Chattahoochee National Forest is giant. It
Yeah.
goes into North Carolina and Tennessee.
Yeah. My ex took me to the Sasquatch Expedition Bigfoot Museum, and it was really cool. I was super blessed to go there, and I'll never forget it.
When you say something to people about going to like Clayton, Georgia, which is northeast Georgia, and right up the road on Highway 441 that goes into North Carolina, and you tell somebody that half of Georgia, the west half of the top of Georgia, is covered by Tennessee, and the right half, the eastern half of the top of Georgia, is covered by North Carolina. They look at you like you're crazy. I said, look at a map. And then they look at it. Oh, it is. I never thought that. I never knew that, and it's like the point of North Carolina covers the top half of the Georgia state line, and the opposite point of Tennessee covers the other half of the Georgia line. And it's you go in. I mean, all of the Chattahoochee National Forest is very dense stuff, hills and cliffs, and just some of the most beautiful land I have ever seen. I would love to live up there.
Yeah, those mountains are incredible.
I don't know if I want to live somewhere that they measure snow in feet instead of inches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of have the trifecta there with those three states converging, and it's prime habitat for these creatures to dwell in.
Some of the primitive campsites that we go to, you literally can walk up a dirt road and it's only one lane. They have to have, like, if you see a vehicle coming, if you see a vehicle coming, they have pullovers because you can't, two vehicles can't pass each other. It's just a one lane dirt road, but you can walk like a mile and a half up that dirt road, and there's a sign on this dirt road that if you pass this sign, you're in North Carolina. And so we would have our picture made with 1 foot in Georgia and 1 foot in North Carolina. And that's cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. This encounter that you had, did you feel like there was anything spiritual behind it, or?
I do. I really do. And a lot of that formed my spirituality in a lot of things. My best friend, who lives about 90 miles south of me, we went to college together, and I'm 21 years older than him, and we were the two most unlikely people in the world to become friends, let alone to meet each other. And we did. And we are best friends to this day. That was 15 years ago that we went to college. And we help each other in spirituality type stuff. And, and we is almost like we were put together by divine providence, that we met each other. And he said, do you think God made our paths cross? I said, no, I think God made our paths merge. That's a difference.
Yeah.
They didn't cross because we would have went separate ways at some point, and we never did.
Absolutely. And the Bible says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another.
Yeah. And so that's what we do. And we can go months without hearing from one another. And it's like I can think, okay, he's about to call me. And literally within an hour, he'll call me.
Yeah. So you guys definitely have a connection there.
Oh, yeah. It's weird. And he knows it. He does the same thing. And then I'll either text or call him. Same thing. I felt like I needed to. I was just thinking about you calling me or texting me or whatever, and we do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I believe that there was something spiritual about that, and I didn't know what that was at 5 years old. I know what it is now, but I believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to have the attitude that you had, like you don't care what others think, you know what you saw, because
Mhm.
that builds up your confidence. If you were to approach it in a sense of man, I don't want to tell anyone, like I'm worried about what other people think, then you're going to carry that on to other aspects of your life, like, oh,
Exactly,
I don't want to talk about this, and you just kind of build
I
up
don't
fear.
talk about this to very many people because I know how they are, and I just don't want to argue with them, and but it will turn into an argument. I'm not arguing with anybody. I know what I saw, whether you believe it or not. That's your business. It ain't mine. I don't care what you think.
Yep, that's my attitude as well. I don't like talking about it with people that I know it's going to like create conflict, and they're not going to believe you, because there's no sense in trying to convince someone who feels like they already know the answer, and that's just simply not true. When you see one of these creatures, you know without a doubt they exist,
I
and
know.
when you tell other people, they just kind of roll their eyes or say, what have you been smoking? I think you're
Well,
hallucinating, and that gets old.
my best friend that I was mentioning earlier, I mentioned it to him. I didn't go into detail, but I just mentioned it and I said, whatever you think, that's what you think. I don't care. If you either believe me or you don't. That's your business. It's not mine. And he said, well, how would you explain that they've never actually proven that they exist? I said, well, let me throw one back at you. Do you know when the gorillas were discovered and actually proven real? In the 1930s. That's not that long ago. That's not even 100 years ago. That's when gorillas were discovered to be real.
Yep, that's a good point there. And
And
these
gorillas are not in the United States. Wow.
mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, just because he mentioned that nobody has ever found a skeleton of one. I said, has anybody ever found a skeleton of a bear? No. Why? Because other bears and other predators probably eat the body and the bones just scatter. Nobody's ever found a skeleton of a bear. Nobody's, unless you have like elk and big, something bigger than a white-tailed deer, like around here, you will, if you have bears, you will find an elk skeleton where a bear ate the elk. But you don't see a bear skeleton because other bears eat them, coyotes, wolves, whatever. And that's why. But bears exist because you see them. I know this was not a bear because a bear does not have fingers. A bear has claws about 6 inches long, curved in. This was not that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point. It's really rare to find a bear skeleton, and I've only heard of a few cases. And I mean, one guy was from Alaska, and it's a guy that had a Bigfoot encounter, and I interviewed him. He said he found a bear skeleton, and then there was, I think it was like a Monster Quest episode. A guy named Doug Hijack was talking about never finding a bear, and the guy that he was speaking to said he found a bear skeleton. But yeah, I know there's bears
Mhm.
around here, but I've never found any remains, and I know they're out there.
I saw one in North Georgia. The last camping trip that I went on. I made a wrong turn going to a state park and came back out of this little paved road. They had just paved it. It was still very shiny black. And across the road there was a steep cliff like dirt, an embankment. And they had cut it out and put gravel in there or crush and run and put that in there for people to drive in there, like they were going to build cabins back there up in there. And a whopper of a bear came walking across that. cutout right there. And he looked toward me, and it was me and my cousin, and he looked toward us, and it just freaked him out. And you wouldn't think something like that could move that fast. And I mean, he was kicking up dirt. And but he got out of there. He was not having anything to do with us, and we were across the road. We wasn't anything close to him or out of the vehicle, but he moved. Now, I mean, he got out of there.
Yeah, that's really cool. And come to think of it, I've never found the remains of like a bobcat or a mountain lion, and
No,
they're out there, but I've never seen any remains from those creatures, let alone a Bigfoot.
I think if they die or if they get killed, like by another animal, that animal eats them, or another predator would eat them, by all means.
Yeah, and I think even like the squirrels chew up the bones. I'm not really sure, but I know they do with like deer horns. They'll take them pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That pretty well covers your Bigfoot encounter, and yeah, I really do appreciate you for sharing this encounter with me, and you handled it very well. I can only imagine what your mother thought whenever she saw you standing at the window and this Sasquatch creature has its hand on the other side of the window. And I can only imagine the fear that she felt.
She wouldn't walk back in the bedroom until my daddy checked it out.
Yeah. What did your dad think? Did he believe you guys?
He didn't really he didn't disbelieve me, but he was, he wasn't sure. He didn't know. And I told him, I didn't go into a lot of detail, but I told him, that, hey, he's hairy. He had giant hands. He was big. And and he had to squat down to see me through the open part of the window. And and he asked me, did he ever make a sound? I said, only breathing. I could hear him breathing through his nose. He didn't breathe open mouthed. I don't breathe open mouth. I never have.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I really appreciate you for sharing this encounter with me and sharing it here on the channel. That really means a lot to me, and I believe you 100%. And yeah, it was a blessing speaking with you today, and it was just incredible.
Yes, sir. I enjoyed it, and I hope to see some pretty good comments on the video. I mean, on the audio.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe there will be other people from, what's it called? Swainsboro.
Yeah,
that have had an encounter as well.
If they see this on the page, on the site, they probably will come forward, because if I'm the first one from Georgia to actually do this, without trying to fake something like some of them have, maybe it will encourage them to come forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're listening to this and you have had a Bigfoot encounter, please contact me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com, and I would love to hear about your encounter. All right, Johnny, you did an excellent job. I appreciate everything you did. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message, or if you want to go camping in the future, I would certainly be up for that.
Hey, when it warms up, I'm ready anytime. I'm retired, technically on disability, but hey, it ain't like I have to go to work anymore.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And just keep in touch, and we can certainly set something up.
Okay.
All right. Well, you have yourself an excellent day. Take care of yourself. And if you encounter anything else, feel free to get in touch with me.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Johnny, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounter with me here on Sasquatch Theory. And that was an intense encounter. I can't imagine being a little kid standing that close to a Sasquatch creature. I wonder why he put his hand up on the window. I really do think that he had some type of sympathy for you and knew what you were going through. Sometimes these creatures can read our minds and they can relate to us. And I certainly do think it's something spiritual, even though it's a physical being. Again, we are physical creatures, and I think this thing was very curious by you. and it wanted to see what you were doing. And I do believe it's been watching you for quite some time, and it knew who you were. Even though you took the encounter very well, I am sure that your mother was traumatized after this experience, and she was wondering what the heck was going on. What is my son doing with this creature that's outside of the window? It really makes you wonder, and I do believe these creatures move whenever it's raining out because there's not people around outside, and they're able to conceal their footsteps and move around very silent. But even if it was a beautiful, clear, sunny day with no wind, these creatures are dead silent, and it's just in their nature. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this episode, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me here on Sasquatch Theory, please contact me sometime. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Take care, and be safe out there in the forest.